A huge thank you to everyone who reached out and gave me support and assistance in being able to save the table saw. And together, we all saved the table saw. Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Papa's Workshop. Well, I finally have some good news. I just received my replacement motor, and the good thing about it is the shaft does in fact turn, and that's a beautiful thing. So today I'm going to go ahead and put this motor onto the table saw, get it all wired, and do a test. And of course, I'm going to fine tune the table saw, and in essence, I'm going to be able to have a brand new table saw as a result of all the different upgrades that I've done and the fine tuning that I'm going to be doing on this saw. And I want to give a special shout out to the Electric Motor Warehouse. When they shipped the first motor and it was defective, they were very quick in being able to respond and work with me to be able to get a replacement motor shipped. So I want to really thank the Electric Motor Warehouse for their prompt service, their excellent customer service in handling the situation, and I really do appreciate the efforts that they have gone through to be able to help get the replacement motor. I want to take this opportunity to give a huge thank you to everyone who had reached out through either the email or the comment section in this video and gave me support and help. I actually wanted to identify a number of the different people, but I realized I don't have permission to give out names, so I'm not going to do that. But the support that you guys gave was absolutely fantastic. A number of you actually did research and found different companies that I could check into and see if I could get a motor. A lot of you had suggested trying to get the motor rebuilt, which is one of the things that I had done, and the company told me, unfortunately, it was impossible to rebuild that particular motor. I contacted each of the companies that you guys had suggested, and one person did suggest the Electric Motor Warehouse, which I had contacted and was able to find a motor. I must say there was a huge range in the prices between the different distributors. I'm very happy that I had received a suggestion to check out the Electric Motor Warehouse. Those guys had been fantastic to be able to work with, and I want to give them a special thank you also. Because when the first motor was shipped and was damaged in the shipping, they did not hesitate to be able to get a second motor in the mail to me, and that was fantastic. So again, I want to thank everybody who had reached out to me and given me support, help, guidance to be able to locate the motor so that together we could save this saw. And together we did save the saw, and now it's better than it ever was, and I'm very, very happy with being able to have this saw back together and working again. And I'm already working on the next video to be able to get out to you guys. So this is the C plate that you need to have this mounted with. And this is the 145 TC. Now I did make a mistake in one of the comments that I made, because this is a 7/8 inch shaft that corresponds to that 145 TC for this face frame. It's time to mount the bracket onto the face plate of this motor. Now there's 4 bolts, and just to be able to align them and screw them in. Again, I like to be able to put all 4 bolts in to begin with, keeping them loose once I have all 4 bolts in. As I have done so many times in the different videos, then I will tighten all 4 of these bolts. The reason that I like to put in all 4 bolts at the same time and keeping them loose is so that it's much, much easier to be able to align them. If I had tightened one bolt, I would not be able to shift this mounting bracket left or right to be able to align the other holes. So just keep that in mind. It's just a nice little easy tip that makes life a whole lot easier when trying to align 4 bolts on this face frame. Now I'm going to add the 3 new belts that I had purchased. Now again, the old belts were not bad, but in keeping with everything else that I'm doing with this saw, I want to be able to have as many new parts as possible. So I'm putting on 3 brand new belts. And yes, I'm going to save the old belts just in case something happens and one of these break. I'll have a spare.
these belts, by placing them on the pulley now, is actually going to make it a lot easier to be able to mount this motor. Remember, this motor is over 60 pounds, plus that mounting bracket, which is not exactly light. Now this has 2 mounting bolts, so I'm going to get these in position so they'll be within easy reach to be able to put those in. Then I'm going to grab the motor and bring it over to the saw. And I think this is the hardest part of all, just dealing with the sheer weight of this motor with this bracket that's on here. But now I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to put this down in place. I want to use those belts and get those onto that pulley as soon as possible, because quite frankly, that is going to take some of the weight off of me holding this while I get these bolts in place. Now I realize this is not the best angle for the camera to be in, but again, I'm not changing it. So I'm going to get this first bolt started here at the top, and that too will help take the weight off of me having to hold that motor. You notice there's only 2 belts that were holding it, but that was enough to be able to take the weight off so I could get that bolt in on the top. Now I can easily be able to maneuver the motor, be able to get all 3 belts on, and make sure that they're completely seated into the pulley on the top as well as the pulley on the motor. And at that point, then I can go ahead and hand tighten the screw on the top. Next, I'll put the bolt into the bottom, and then we can tighten the belts and secure everything. I know it was hard to get the right camera angle, but this is the pivot bolt right here. And down underneath is the bolt where you can apply the tension on the belts and get it tight. So those are the 2 mounting bolts for the motor to the actual frame of the saw. Then I have the brand new belts on, and if you look, the alignment is perfect, so there's no need to adjust that. Now that the motor is actually mounted and the 2 mounting bolts are in place, I want to be able to put just a little bit of tension and tighten the belts. And just by applying a little bit of pressure, and you don't need a whole lot, I can tighten that bottom bolt. That will actually hold it in place. And then I can come up and tighten this top bolt. I need this deep box and this size of box to be able to have it match up to this new switch. Now this old switch is something that probably belongs in a museum. This is ancient. But one thing that I realized is that there's nothing original on this saw with regard to the wiring. Now originally I had thought just to change out the switch and use the existing wiring. But I want to show you some of the problems that I ran into when I was looking at this old wiring that was in place and realized it had to go. Now this is a segment of the wire that came from the motor over to the switch itself. And if you look at that, it's in pretty bad shape. You can actually see where the insulation is actually broken right there, and that's not the only place. In addition to that, this is actually a 12-4 wire, meaning that there's 4 wires and it's 12 gauge. The red wire that was in here was just cut off and wasn't being used at all. So this is going to be completely replaced. In addition to that, the wire that ran from the switch itself over to the wall outlet was actually 10-3, which, and quite frankly, it was not in any better shape. So again, that's the reason to be able to replace every bit of this wiring. I had actually never looked at this before, but this switch actually was designed for a 1-horse, 125 volt DC, and then as far as the AC, it was 1 horse, 115 volt for an AC for 1 phase, or a 1.5 volts horsepower for a 230 volt 1 phase. So this switch was actually operating a 3-horse motor, 230 volt AC on the 1 phase. So I don't know if this is the actual original switch or not, but the other thing that's interesting, there is no information on this switch at all as far as where the line comes in and the load goes out. So it's a very interesting, very old switch. And again, I don't know if this is the original switch or not. On this new switch that I'm going to put on, we do have on this one, you see the word load right here
with the arrow for these two, and then you have the line right here for this. So the power comes in on this side, and then the power will come out on this side. Now this has numerous holes in it, obviously from different setups that would be available, or perhaps in the past they had different switches on here. Really don't know. The switch that I just took off was the only switch that, to my knowledge, had ever been on this saw. But it is an awful lot of mounting holes that they had throughout this whole entire plate. It would appear that these two holes will align up. So I'm going to put this in right here and see if that will work. I'm really hoping that it will. And yes, that is perfect. That puts it in the center of the plate, and that is perfect, so I don't have to drill any holes. Understanding the wiring diagram is very important, so look at this very closely. You have the P1, which is actually identified as L1, and you also have the T4 and T5, which is identified as the L2. And those are your two hot leads, and that's where you will connect the white wire and the black wire. The one in the center is actually designed so that if you need to reverse the direction, you can change the wire T8 with T5 and be able to attach your wire nut onto that and be able to have it where the motor will run in the opposite direction. Your ground wire, or your green wire that's going to come into the motor, is going to be grounded directly to the motor itself with a little ground screw that's located in the back of the box. So this is very important to be able to understand this and follow this very closely. As you look at this, this is my T4 and T5. So this is my L2, which is one of your hot leads. And over here, this one is labeled P1. So this is actually your L1, which is your other hot lead. The other section is for the reversing of the motor, which I actually had to do. I had to reverse the T5 and the T8 to be able to get it rotating in the right direction. I'm going to replace the electrical outlet on the wall as well as the connection on the cord and completely replace this old cord. I want everything completely brand new. Understand that there was nothing wrong with the outlet that was in the wall, other than the fact that it was not a locking type. So when you plugged in the cord weight itself would actually be able to pull out of this outlet, and this I did not want. So by replacing this type of an outlet with a locking outlet, it means that the cord is not going to sag and it's not going to pull out of the wall. And to me, that's something that was very important, to have this type of arrangement where it has a locking connection, means that it's not going to fall out of the wall with the weight of that cord. So just to be able to review, I have all new wiring. I put in this new safety switch with this bump stop, so now if there's a problem, I could just bump that with the knee. I've also double checked, made sure that all the bolts are tight, the belts are on correctly, and the installation is now completed. The next step, of course, is to be able to get that tabletop back onto the table base itself. Now there are 3 screws that will go into this. So I'm going to put these 3 screws in, and then I'll be able to shift the table left and right to be able to get that where the blade is exactly aligned to that tabletop. And there's only 3 screws that you do that with. To be able to move this tabletop, which is very heavy, I'm just going to slowly inch it over and get it in place. Now this is one of the 3 bolts that actually hold this tabletop in place, and you can see they're pretty significant bolts. This tabletop, to be able to get it back onto the saw base, is extremely heavy, far more than what I can actually lift, but I can slide it. So I'm going to slide it over a little bit, go to the other side, and I'm going to slide that over. And I'm going to continue to moving this left and right type of operation, sliding it just a little bit, making sure that I keep it balanced so it doesn't fall on the floor,
because that would probably break this top. So after doing this several times, I'll have this in place. But don't rush it, take your time, and you have to realize this is an extremely heavy top that you cannot just pick up and drop in place. Now that the table saw is in place, I just need to be able to screw in these 3 bolts. I'm going to leave them loose so that I can move the table left and right to be able to align the saw blade so it's perfectly aligned to the tabletop itself. It's time to be able to align the saw blade to the tabletop using the 3D printed mount for the dial indicator. To begin with, I want to take a Sharpie marker and I want to put a little dot right there on the saw blade, and that's going to be my reference point. I'm going to put the dial indicator right there, verify that it's set to 0, and take your time with this process. You really don't want to rush this. Then I'll slide the dial indicator down to the other end, rotate the blade over, and you can take a look at that, and you're going to see that that's 11 thousandths difference. So I need to move the back of the table in this direction, that 11 thousandths of an inch. And of course, that's going to change a little bit when I remeasure the front. And that's why I say you need to take your time to be able to make these small adjustments. If you remember when I showed you the 3 screws that actually hold the tabletop on, that one screw is in the center on the back. So that I actually moved to be able to keep it as close to the center as I could. And for the rest of these small adjustments, I'm going to be moving the front edge of this table left or right to be able to close the gap and be able to get the error from the front edge of the blade to the back of the blade as close to 0 as I can. I'm hoping to be able to get within 1 or maybe 2 thousandths of an inch.
So after making some very small adjustments, I'm now sitting at 0. I can slide that over to here. I'm going to bring the blade back over to that point, and I'm within 2 thousandths of an inch. And I'm going to see if I can get it a little bit closer. But that just takes small little movements at a time to be able to do that. Now, I made some small adjustments again, and at this point I have 1 thousandth there, and I have 2 thousandths there. So I'm within 1 thousandth of an inch. I think that's about as good as you're going to get. So I'm going to take that off, tighten these 3 bolts, and then we'll adjust it and make sure that it didn't move.
After tightening the 3 bolts underneath the table to secure it and make sure that it's tight, I want to be able to just double check and make sure that nothing moved. So I'm going to again start right here at the 0. I'm going to slide the dial indicator down to the other end and check the alignment, and yes, I'm within about 1.5 thousandths of an inch difference, and yes, I could live with that. I think that's fantastic. I want to take the new 0 clearance insert that I had made, and I want to be able to add this into the table saw. Now when you do this, you're going to be raising the blade up through this, and you want to make sure you have a piece of wood that will hold down that insert and keep your fingers well away from that blade. And then slowly raise the blade and it will cut through this 0 clearance insert. And that's really all that's necessary. But now I have a brand new insert, and I've thrown away the old one that I had, which was broken and completely worn out. I've added the fence back to the table saw, and it slides very easily. Now I can check the alignment, but I just bring it over to the edge of this track and see that it's perfectly aligned. Now if I needed to make adjustments, I certainly could do so at this end of the fence. But at this point, there is no need. It is aligned perfectly. It's time to test out the new saw and just see how well it cuts. Now this is actually the second cut. The reason it's the second cut and not the first one is simply because I forgot to turn the camera on. But I wanted to show you just how well that this new saw, and I'm saying new saw because virtually everything is new on this saw, and this absolutely cuts like butter. One of the important factors is that the blade is perfectly aligned within 1 thousandth or 2 thousandths of an inch. That is so much better than I had ever imagined.
Well, folks, at this point, the project is finally done. The table saw is completely rebuilt. I have the new motor on it, and it works great. Now, the only thing that's left is to be able to continue to work with the electric motor warehouse to be able to get the disposition of this one and the return authorization so that I can send it back, because it was damaged in the shipping. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. It took quite some time to be able to put this whole video together from start to finish because of the different problems that I had. But in the end, I'm very happy with the results. I have, in essence, a brand new table saw that is 60 years old. What the heck? I absolutely love it. I love the saw. I love the fact that I was able to save it and be able to keep this heirloom in the family. So if you like this video, by all means, give me a thumbs up. And by the way, hit that subscribe button right down there. There's an awful lot of people that watch the videos and never subscribe. And I know they can come back over and over again, but I would really appreciate if you just hit that little subscribe button. It would help me out a whole lot. And I appreciate you watching the different videos. And I hope that you actually learned something and enjoyed the whole process from beginning to end on being able to get this table saw back in basically brand new condition. So until next time, guys, I look forward to seeing you in the next video, whatever that may be. But I'm pretty well sure that it's going to be using the table saw. So bye-bye, everyone.
A little sneak peek for the next video is the fact that I'm going to be making a cabinet that's going to fit into the kitchen of my son's house. So I'm starting to be able to cut the basic material down into the sizes to build this cabinet. So stay tuned. I'm going to be using some different techniques to be able to build this cabinet from what I have done in the past. You don't want to miss this. So I look forward to seeing you in this next video using the new table saw and building a cabinet using a little bit different design from what I've done in the past.